don't remember the year, but I met Casket at Dave's house. Dave and I used to work together at Guitar Center in Yonkers. And for a while, he kept harassing me about linking up with a friend of his, turned out to be Casket. And it was like months of, because I used to play beats at the store all the time. Every time I did something new, I would check my mixes at the store. And so he, working next to each other all the time, he was constantly telling me about Casket and, the music he was doing and that we would be, a dope pair. So one day it was just like, all right, yeah, whatever, let's make it happen. And we linked up at his house. Um, and then right from then, that first night, it was, the chemistry was strong. It felt real natural. Like we clicked, we vibed. And so I gave him a bunch of beats, and definitely a handful of these beats from that first batch made it onto this particular project. Um, from there, we just started working on music, together. We were helping, or I was helping him with uh, finishing off Southie, which happened the process of that started a few months down the road from there. Um, we released a miscellaneous single called Sound of the Raw, which is actually the first like official record I've ever produced that's been released. And then from there, that was just kind of the start of the musical journey. So definitely as a person, I was trying to, I guess, get my footing in terms of where or what I was planning on doing musically. Like I had been making music for years at that point. But like I said earlier, up to leading up to Sound of the Raw, I actually hadn't released anything, whether it be music for myself or music produced for another person. Um, Casket for me was definitely a necessary development point for myself as an artist and as a person, just because I thought I was dope. I thought I had a lot to offer, but I didn't know what that looked like or what that felt like. And I guess, for lack of better words, I didn't know what I could offer an artist either. Um, I had never gotten any real opportunity to work with someone on a one-on-one basis on any body of work, let alone albums or series of albums. Um, so at that time, you know, I was definitely still trying to figure out my identity as a producer, as an engineer, you know, in terms of where my life was at. I was just trying to get by, honestly. I was just working, trying to get money, trying to pay bills. That's all I really cared about at that point. Um, and, with in my mind wanting to make more time for music, wanting to connect with people who are, like-minded. So in that regard, I'm super grateful to Dave, because at the end of the day, had he not been the one harassing me, that connection with Casket probably would have never happened.
What impressed you about like Cassie? Like, what made you want to work with him?
Um, so it was just vibe and energy. I think is important when you talk about working with people in general. Even more so when you start talking about creative work and artistic work. I think when you talk about music, the music is this broad universal thing. Like, I know we talk about rap music or whatever genre of music you want to talk about, but at the end of the day, every single artist is different, and every single artist will have something different to say and will have a different interpretation on a beat or a track. And the same works for producers also, right? So it's like, it's not always going to work. It's not always going to fit together. Not every producer can work with every artist and vice versa. Um, so for me, it's like, I think step one was just like we got in the room and the vibes were dope. I think we realized that the other was really good at what they do. Um, and I think probably most importantly at that point, we both realized that the other person was able to elevate the next person. So obviously for Casket, he was a little further along the road in terms of his development as an artist versus where I was at as a producer. But, I definitely was a key part in the growth of Casket and his discography and his, obviously his fan base. And then for me, it's, the experience of getting to work with someone, developing a project, taking those steps, making the mistakes, learning how to, fix whatever recording mistakes or mixing mistakes that I had. There was lots of technical growth and personal growth that I think we both, I don't want to use the word force, but essentially that's what it was, forced each other to grow and be better. And I think each of our strengths as a producer and as a rapper, writer, forced the other person to step up their game. Yeah, so I did Homeboy and Summer Breeze. Like I said earlier, those three beats were originally part of a batch of about 10 beats that I gave him on that initial meet. At when we met up that night, I was just playing music for him, and he picked out a bunch of stuff, but those are the three that, really developed into something. With, if I'm not mistaken, the first song to actually be done was Summer Breeze, followed by Home, and then Boy. Uh, so I have I'm sorry, very, I have a very unique point on this particular album because for everyone listening to it for the first time, it's going to be music that is going to be new to them, right? For me, some of these beats are 9, 10 years old at this point, So for me, some of these beats are forgotten about, like until he plays these records for me or played these records for me for the first time. I forgot that these beats even existed. So, it's one of those things where even listening to it now, with my growth, not just as a producer, but as a musician, it's like, oh man, like I hear this and it's like I could do this better or I could do that better, or man, I would really love a chance to redo this beat or redo this, or redo that. And for most of those beats, unfortunately, I don't have those sessions anymore. So they're kind of just is what it is snapshot of where I was at that point in time. I think sonically, they were very emotional and very dark, which kind of mirrored where I was, not necessarily in terms of darkness or depression or anything like that, but it was a struggle. Like I was just trying, it was a struggle for me to get by, pay bills, you know, at that point in my life, my mother was sick, wasn't doing well from a health perspective. So there was a lot of personal issues going there that I think fueled some of that emotion through those beats. The only session that we did try to redo, just because I did have some of the stems, was Home. Home went through several iterations. Some iterations I felt took a good step forward in terms of the song as a whole, and then some iterations took a step back. There was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of tweaks. We probably went through well over 10 different versions of that with most of them being minor tweaks here or there, but it was always just revisiting what we could do with the production, drums, sequencing of the beat, things of that nature. So for me, I mean, um, I guess from an emotional perspective, it's kind of like my birth as a producer. I think, like I said, even though it's not the first thing that's being released, it was the first thing that we did together, chronologically speaking. Um, and so for me, there's a lot of just emotion behind something like that, where it's like, you know, at that point in time when these songs were originally being made, I wasn't sure that anything would really come from it. A, and then B, that not only would a lot of good things come from it, but like we're continuing to grow a fan base. We're continuing to every project does better than the last, and I mean with the long term goal of obviously having music be what we do, right? Like we both have jobs and things like that that we need to maintain because music isn't paying all of the bills yet. But for me, that's like the first thing I think of is in the moment, I was just like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Give this guy beats. He's dope. Let's see what happens. And, fast forward however many years it's been, it's like now we're releasing album number like 6, I think, somewhere along that line. Since then I've produced around 50% of his discography. And, whatever I didn't produce, I had some level of involvement, whether it be recording, mixing, post production stuff, tracking guitar or any live instrumentation. So it's like, I'm grateful because obviously lots of great things have happened since then. I'm very reminiscent of obviously the opportunity, and I'm very grateful to everyone, obviously, because at the end of the day, Casket I think is a great rapper and would have done fine regardless. You know what I'm saying? There's lots of great producers out there. There are a lot of great musicians out there looking for opportunities as well. And I think that at the end of the day, he probably would have found someone to make that work. So I'm grateful that I was able to be a part of that.
The phrase like beautiful struggle, like how would you define that in your own words?
How would I define that in my own words? I think at the end of the day, this is very autobiographical, right? This entire project is, I guess, just a snapshot of a time and place during his life, right? But I think that at the end of the day, we all have similar snapshots. Maybe it doesn't have to be somebody necessarily running the streets, right? But we've every single one of us at some point or another has had a point in life where it's been rough or dark or painful or all of the above. And if it hasn't happened yet, it will happen eventually because that's just the way life is. Um, so for me, it's like this is just a opportunity to see how someone else coped, what mistakes they made, what good things came out of it, and how you could potentially apply that to your life, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I think art is alive, right? So it's like just because these things are in his past doesn't mean that it can't affect the futures of other people, right? Especially people who are living what he lived right now, because there's plenty of people, plenty of kids right now going through it who either have no choice but to run the streets or feel like they have no choice. I think that there is an opportunity for these kids to see something else, see someone else who went through what they went through or something similar and manage to, pivot into something more positive, and obviously healthier lifestyle. So,
I think the last thing I'm just gonna ask is just like, questions on like what you think personally of Casket, and his artistry. He just wants to step back because he wants to do organic.
Yeah.
He doesn't want you to feel pressure to say good, like yeah. So now you can talk all your shit.
what do I think about Casket's artistry?
Yeah.
So, obviously, I think he's great. I mean, I'm heavily invested into his success, right? My successes as a producer currently is very heavily tied to his. But at the end of the day, there's very few people that I've come across that I think are gifted in terms of song composition like he is. I mean, for one, he never writes anything down, right? So everything that he writes, every lyric that you hear, everything that's been recorded is essentially just one long freestyle. Which that by itself, I think, is incredible because most people need to write down ideas and then it'll be a bar here, a bar there, and you got to piece things together, and that can be a slow moving process at times depending on how motivated or inspired they may be or how proficient of a writer they are. I mean, Casket will hear something and we'll have a song ready in 10 minutes. He'll go in a corner, kind of talk to himself for a little bit, and then, come up, yeah, I'm ready, let's do it. And it's almost always extremely cohesive, well thought out. There's never been a point that I can recall where we've had to circle back and rewrite a part of a song. So right there, I mean, I think that speaks volumes to his ability to write. I've also seen him just, obviously there have been a lot of collaboration projects. He's done a project with Genesis. He's done a project with Blizz.
I think the batteries just died. Let me just switch things out. I don't remember the last. Do you remember the last thought you were on?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's also, he can jump on anything as well, even tracks that may not necessarily be the most inspiring to him as a writer. Obviously, he's done multiple joint projects. Obviously with Genesis, with everything in between, Black, Blizz, with the Past the Paper projects. He usually, at least for those kinds of projects, it allows the collaborator to pick whatever they want to work on, and then he'll kind of fill in the gaps. Another really interesting way that he's recorded and written in the past is we'll make something, or more specifically, I'll make something, and we'll both envision a feature or a singer, vocalist. And usually his approach to something like that would be, give it to the vocalist, let them come up with something, and then we'll follow whatever their lead is. Again, I think stuff like that really speaks volumes to his ability to write and create, because at the end of the day, there are no walls with how he approaches music, right? Like, most people need to be in control of whatever they're a part of, right? Whether it be a collaboration or a single, a song intended for themselves. His approach to writing music is just whatever happens, happens, and it's very organic. And I think that's one reason why it tends to get the reception that it does, because at the very least, it all comes from the heart, right? And is all very natural. I think he's a great developer as well. I mean, Genesis, with everything in between, I think he's extremely talented, and definitely Casket was a catalyst of that project and getting that project off of the ground. I've already spoken about what Casket's done for me, musically speaking, for Blizz, musically speaking, and the rest of the camp as well. I mean, there's lots of talent in the camp that I think probably would not have pursued music the way that we do had he not been there to motivate and challenge each of us. So I think he's a great leader in that regard too. Very supportive of anyone who's willing to put the time in to their craft, including artists that may not necessarily, quote unquote, fit the image or fit the style of music or the genre of music. I think that he is a great collaborator and is certainly willing to do whatever is necessary from a musical perspective to make the song as great as it can be.
I think that's pretty much everything. The only thing I think I want to add is just a final question, and then we'll all go home.
Sure.
Was just let me just first change this battery.
So Casket's growth as a person, at least from my perspective, has been pretty heavy and strong, right? I mean, so obviously there's a lot of history there, running the streets. He's, obviously been severely injured, and he's had some run-in with the law and all that. That all happened before me. So I learned all of that as I was getting to know him. But, when I met him, his daughter wasn't born yet. So from there, obviously, as the years went on, he, had a child. And for me, I think the biggest development that I've seen from a personal level would be pertaining to his child. He is extremely involved in all of her activities. He's extremely involved as a father, which for me personally, as someone who grew up without a father figure, that is huge, right? At the end of the day, his little girl has both parents. They're both very actively involved, but I think something like that has stemmed even further into him coaching basketball teams, softball teams. His, I think, parental instincts have kind of expanded to wanting to help youth outside of his child, right? Outside of his daughter. And obviously I think, positive impact is important for everyone, but especially so for children. Positive role models, positive leadership, positive influences we need more of that in the world. I think there's plenty of negative things in the world to gain the attention of some of the children. And so the fact that someone like him has taken the initiative to help groom kids through sports has been huge. I think part of that has also helped him to continue to develop as a leader. Several people within the camp, including myself, definitely look to him to be the leader, not only from a business perspective with the music, but just life in general. I can speak from my own experiences that there have been plenty of times I've been down in the dumps emotionally or mentally, and he's kept me grounded, um, kept me focused on what I need to, while also understanding and not downplaying how I'm feeling, which I think is really important. Um, I think he's just super motivational and, great work ethic. And I think all of the people that come into his circle are positively impacted by those things. Um, so, yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's good. That's a wrap.
Sweet.